Good evening, everybody. It is so fantastic to have all of you here tonight, and what great energy in this room for this special topic with a couple of very special people. My name is Sarah Shute, and I have the great pleasure of serving as the Chief Alumni Engagement Officer and Executive Director of the Wisconsin Alumni Association. And on behalf of all of us at the Wisconsin Foundation and Alumni Association, welcome to the Wisconsin Idea Spotlight program, Moments of Happiness. And what a happy topic with happy people we get to enjoy tonight. What a testament to your dedication and your passion and spirit for the university to be here, and it's just a delight. Now, I also know that we have a lot of people here who are members of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, and I thank you for your support. Your support of WAA helps us support the university and keep Badgers connected and informed. How many of you here tonight are WAA members? Show of hands. All right. Thank you. Oh, you can clap for yourselves. That's okay. I also am feeling a special energy tonight that comes usually only when the UW Marching Band is somehow involved. How many of you are band alumni or current band members? Yeah, that's what I thought. I could feel you in the room. Welcome. Well, this program is made possible due to the generosity of our sponsors. A special thanks to the Sandra G. Sponham Alumni Park Signature Program Series Fund, and also to Capitol Lakes, which is Madison's premier not-for-profit continuing care retirement community. After the presentation, we will have some Q&A, and then that will be followed by a book signing. I saw some of you at the table buying your books, but if you do not yet have your copy of Moment of Happiness, a Wisconsin band story, be sure to pick it up after the program. A big thank you to Mystery to Me booksellers for being here, owned by a UW grad. Now more applause. See, great energy, great Badger energy tonight. Couple of housekeeping items. As a reminder, out of respect for our speakers and fellow guests, take a moment now to silence or turn off your cell phone or any other electronic devices. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the Alumni Center and the UW-Madison campus are situated on traditional territories, and the Wisconsin Foundation and Alumni Association respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation along with the other 11 First Nations of Wisconsin. We have a wonderful program for you tonight. We have wonderful energy in the room, and now it's my pleasure to begin introducing our two incredible speakers, Doug Moe and Mike Leckrone. Doug Moe is one of Wisconsin's best-known journalists and nonfiction authors. A former editor of Madison magazine, he wrote a daily newspaper column in Madison for 2 decades and has published more than a dozen books, including Tommy, My Journey of a Lifetime, in collaboration with Tommy Thompson, and The Right Thing to Do, Kit Saunders Nordine and the Rise of Women's Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Wisconsin and Beyond. Doug has been honored for more than a dozen years as best columnist in the Best of Madison poll, including this year. And we are so fortunate to have such an expert author and speaker and a guy who knows UW-Madison pretty well with us tonight. And of course, we have Mike Leckrone. And when Mike retired as director of bands at the University of Wisconsin in 2019, he had served in that role for an astonishing 50 years. He created the fifth quarter celebration that follows all home football games, removed barriers for women to march in the band, and established regular appearances at Camp Randall by special needs high school musicians. Mike Leckrone's myriad civic, music, and academic recognitions include Outstanding Educator of America by the Outstanding Americans Foundation, Citation of Excellence by the National Band Association, John Bascom Professorship by UW-Madison, Hometown Hero Award by the Wisconsin State Assembly, and induction into the Wisconsin Hockey Hall of Fame and the Wisconsin Football Hall of Fame. What a treat we have in store for us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Doug and Mike to the stage.
After that introduction, I can't wait to hear what I've got to say.
Thanks so much for coming tonight, folks. Mike grew up in small-town Indiana, the son of a highly recognized and regarded high school band director. More than that, they performed together. Mike, can you share that story of you and your dad going vaudeville?
Well, Dad was a great piano player, and when I was old enough to sort of start playing a little bit more in public, he started working me in gently, till eventually we had an act. And we called it our vaudeville act. And it lasted, well, we could do maybe 30, 40 minutes of just shtick. And so we put together a performance. We started performing quite a bit around Indiana. That's where we were the biggest. We performed a lot, and we had a number of things in the act. Dad could play anything you want, and so he would play something, and I'd say, can't you play anything more difficult than that? And so he would put on a pair of mittens and play the same thing with mittens, which people thought was pretty interesting. He had a thing worked out he'd learned from watching Chico Marx on television, that Chico Marx would do a thing where he would roll a ball in one hand, playing notes for a tune, while the left hand would play notes. And in the middle of the tune, he would switch it and play this hand, play the ball with the left hand, and back and forth. And that was pretty astounding. And he got me in the act by doing various things. First of all, just playing a trumpet. So I learned how to play a famous Carnival of Venice variation with one finger. I learned it from a guy named Rafael Mendez. And Rafael Mendez was able to play this very difficult thing with one finger. And he showed me how to do it. And it wasn't as hard as it looked, but it was enough that audience were pretty impressed. But the thing that I think impressed most people was we had a bit in this show where he would play my instrument while I would play his. Now, the way we did that is he would pick up the horn, bring his hand up and around, and play the fingering on the horn I was playing. I would bring my hand over around and finger the horn that he was playing, and we would play in harmony, sometimes pretty difficult little numbers. And the audience usually reacted, oh. Because they had seen people play a duet before. So we had to explain it. We explained to the audience, you hold your hand here, no, you hold your hand here. So we would do maybe 5 minutes of just business about who deciding who was going to play what, and then we got into an argument about who was the best player and who would get to play the first part. And by the time we got ready to actually play the piece, the audience didn't care anymore. And so we would do it. But it became a sort of a staple in our show that people, once they figured out, it is hard. It's not easy. And once they figured out it was hard, it was a good part of the show.
His position allowed you, I think that this was a very important occurrence in your life, to go backstage and watch Louis Armstrong at a small venue in Indiana, right?
Yeah. I got an opportunity. The man who was teaching me trumpet at the time said, Mike, I've got a couple tickets to go backstage at the Louis Armstrong performance in Rochester, Indiana. Would you be interested in going? And I said, well, let me think it over. Yeah. Yes. And it was a wonderful experience for me because I sat closer to Louis Armstrong than I am here on stage with you folks. I was closer to that for the whole evening. For 3 hours, I got a chance to watch Louis Armstrong play at that distance. And it was just marvelous to watch him. And at the end, I started realizing what I had seen. Here's a guy playing in a little one-horse dance hall in Indiana, playing for an audience who most of them probably didn't understand. Here's one of the great musical stars in the world. And it was on a Tuesday night, as I recall. You know, the audience particularly didn't care. They'd heard Louis play all these tunes dozens of times. But the thing that impressed me was, you would have thought Louis Armstrong was on Carnegie Hall. He gave that performance every bit of energy that he could. And I know Doug feels this too. You can sense when somebody's going through the motions. He didn't go through the motions. It was that way for the whole evening. This little jerky town that close to where I grew up, which is even jerkier. But the thing that I took away from that, and that's one of the things I tried to relate to band students over the years, it doesn't matter about the audience. It doesn't matter whether it's an audience that's not as good as you wanted, not as big as you wanted, not as being entertained as you want, but you have to give everything you got to that performance. And I took that message back in my mind because Louis so impressed me with what he did that I tried to make students understand that it doesn't matter who the audience is. You have to give everything you can, no matter who's sitting out there. And I've followed that until tonight.
You know, in those days, Mike, I know that you, in 7th grade, were first chair trumpet. Could you share with us who was second chair trumpet?
Well, the person who was second chair, we met in the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And I think we both kind of liked each other, but she wound up being my wife. From that point on, we were well, she acted like my wife from that point on, but she became, many of you know Phyllis, and she was very dear to what I tried to do. And from the 7th grade on, we were a couple. And it was, she was second chair. Now, she always told other people she should have been first chair, but she only told people who hadn't heard her play.
You spent a decade at Butler University, and you write in the book that you enjoyed it quite a bit and maybe could have stayed. But when the University of Wisconsin position was posted, you decided to apply. Can you talk about that and how it went?
Well, Doug put it very well. I could have stayed. I loved Butler University. I thought it was a great school, and I had a great opportunity to do what I did there, but you get ambitious. You get saying, can I make it work at the next level? Can I do what I want to do another level up? And so I applied for the job at University of Wisconsin, and surprisingly, I got it. I mean, it was a long process for it to occur, but eventually I was named the director. And the problem was, I hadn't thought it all the way through. First place, when I decided to come to Wisconsin, that was a tough time.
1969.
1969. If you know what it was like around this campus in 1969, it was tough. There were a lot of riots. There were a lot of social problems that were going on, and people, it was not a good environment. I learned what tear gas smelled like that first year. You learned a lot of things that you maybe didn't know you wanted to know. Second thing was, I was going to be the third band director they had in 3 years. And that's not particularly good either, because there's no continuity. There's no sense of making a heritage that you can pass on traditions and so forth. Ray Dvorak had been the band director here for 34 years. And I remember thinking, band director for 34 years, how could anybody stay in one job? But by the way, a great man, a great man. I would never fail to give recognition to a guy who is very important in being one of the really originators of the Wisconsin band. He was a terrific man, and if you don't know much about him, you should learn about him, because he was a terrific person. But there was an interim after Ray retired, and I came in. And I was new and had a lot of different ideas, and it didn't seem like a good choice. The other reason that may not have been a good choice is that Wisconsin hadn't won a football game in 2 years.
Mike, I got also, I believe you accepted the job in Madison, and then you invited Phyllis up too.
That was another mistake I made. I had accepted the job and said I would come, and we decided we wanted to find a house in Madison. That's a natural thing to do. So I drove Phyllis up here, and we looked around neighborhoods and found a house that we thought we wanted. And I got a chance to show her around campus. Now, remember what the campus was like at 1969 at that particular point. I drove her down State Street, or walked her down State Street, and in 1969 there were some very unusual sights on State Street and things. I remember a guy walking down State Street in the sunshine with an umbrella that didn't have any fabric on it. And he looked very serious. There were spots like that. So I let her take this all in, and we were driving back to Madison. And I think we got to about Beloit or Rockford or someplace, and I said, well, what'd you think? And she cried almost the rest of the way. But it turned out really well. She was having to leave her roots, and so I knew it was going to be difficult for her, but we had, at that time, we had 2 kids, I had 3 kids with another one on the way. I didn't write arrangements all the time. But I think we were both happy with the mistake we made.
You were also charged on arrival, I think, with starting a pep band. I know that you did not like that term and changed it, but eventually it worked so well at basketball games that the hockey coach came up and said, "You got to come help us."
One of the jobs when I was hired, I said, we want a pep band here at the university. They called it a pep band. As Doug said, I don't like the term. I think it sounds kind of chintzy. So one of the first things I did was change the name. We're going to be the varsity band. Partly because we played for varsity sports, partly because the tune varsity was on a very important song that the students related to. So we formed this band, and it was pretty successful. The local basketball boosters bought us some red and white striped coats, and we were kind of a big hit at basketball games. We did a lot of floor shows. We'd bring the band out on the floor at the basketball games and play mini concerts and then go back into the stands. It wasn't long till Coach Bob Johnson heard about us. And Coach Johnson said, Mike, I need to have you at the hockey games. You got to be at the hockey games. And I said, we're new at this. I said, okay, we'll try a couple of games, a couple Saturday night games. So we tried it. Bob Johnson came to me and said, Mike, we need you at all the Saturday night games. We need you to be there. So I checked with the kids. They said, fine, we'll do it. So we showed up at all the Saturday night games. It wasn't a half a year later that Bob says, we got to have it all the games. The people that have the Saturday night or the Friday night tickets are complaining because they don't get the band on Saturday. So again, we checked with the kids and they decided to do it. And we became one of the, I think, attractions, along with the beer garden, at the hockey games. And it was, if you ever one of those, I know Doug was there at some of them. Those were riotous times. They were enthusiastic times. The crowd was unlike, and the capper on it was shortly after we started playing at hockey games. The band won, or the team won the national championship, 1973, and that was a great, great moment, not only for the team, but it gave the band much more impetus and much more enthusiasm.
Early on at the Coliseum, didn't the student section start chanting something to you guys?
Well, yeah, that's where a couple of things came from. When we would play at a hockey game, there was a group of people up in section GG, I remember very clearly, and we'd stop playing, and what I would hear from the people up in GG, we want a polka, we want a polka. Now, I'm from Indiana. I don't understand all that polka business, but so I said, we had this tune in the book called You Said It All. It was a jingle written by a guy named Stevie Carman. And I told the band, I said, well, if you fix the drum part a little bit and play it this way, and we changed a couple of melodic lines, I said, people are going to think it's a polka. They ain't going to bother me anymore. So we did it. I thought, well, that's the end of that. Next game. We want a polka. We want a polka. So I played it again. And then I noticed that the students, when they came to that spot where there's a break, when you say, they were saying the name of the product. And so I thought, well, that's not a good idea. First of all, it looks like we're advertising a product. Second problem is fans might be thinking the students were drinking or something. So I told the band, I said, when we get to that spot, stand up, turn around and face GG, face the audience, and holler, when you say, Wisconsin, you've said it all. And it didn't work. The only people who were saying it was the band. But it sort of started, for a while there was a battle back and forth. Kind of like taste filling, or whatever that was.
Right,
yeah.
Tastes great.
Less filling tastes great. And that went for a while. And finally, we outnumbered them. Finally, we overcame them, and it became, when you say Wisconsin, you've said it all. And it became sort of a trademark tune for us. We got to play it everywhere you imagined. And before, we played it at that 1973.
Boston Garden, yeah.
Yeah, the Boston Gardens, we won the national championship, and the place was... Can you imagine what it was like winning the national championship in Boston in 1973 on St. Patrick's Day?
Now, after hockey and the success there, didn't you guys end up playing for virtually every sport?
Doug knows the answer. We've played over the years that I was with Wisconsin, we eventually got asked by various parts of the athletic department to play for everything. We have played for virtually every sport, except there's one I didn't get to work out, and that was fencing. I couldn't figure out where halftime was. But we played baseball games when we had baseball here. We played track meets. We played soccer.
How about swimming?
We tried to play swimming. Jack Pettinger was the swimming coach, and we used to practice across from the natatorium, where the vet school is now. And after practice, sometimes he would come, Mike, let me get you a swimming meet. Got to come play at one of the swimming meets. And he pestered me so much that finally, when we had a Friday afternoon, we didn't have a lot going on. I said, okay, Ben, we're going to pack up. We're going to go out. We're going to go across the street to the natatorium. We're going to play for a swimming meet. So I took about 20 guys inside. And, you know, if you've been in the nat, you know there was this upper balcony thing, and we set them up there, and we got ready to play. And I was thinking to myself, you know, I'm going to get Jack off my shoulder or off my back for a while. And we got ready to play, and we looked down, and I started playing, and we hadn't played 3 notes till Jack Pettinger stood up and went. And it was like Mammoth Cave. It was like you couldn't hear yourself or couldn't hear yourself, and so Jack finally said, maybe it wasn't a good idea. So we tried to play swimming. We played a varsity band gig on a barge in the middle of Lake Wingra.
For the crew.
So I think we've played everywhere you could possibly play as varsity band.
By the mid-'70s, you were looking for a way to put sort of an exclamation point on the season, and it's spring, and I know the band said, let's have a party, and you said, maybe we should have a concert. Can you talk?
Yeah, it happened more or less the way Doug explained it. In those days, the last game that you played, and it was usually basketball or hockey, the last game that you played, that was it. People played the game, they went home. And I thought there ought to be some celebration because not everybody who was in the varsity band was able to participate. Some of them played the game and some of them didn't. So I thought, well, let's have an event where we can get everybody together one last time. And of course, the band kids said, let's have a party. That was their answer to everything. I said, well, better than have a party, let's have a concert. Let's do this concert, and then we'll have a party. And they bought into that, and I said, and we're going to charge an admission. I had one kid who said, it ain't going to work. Nobody's going to pay $1.50 to come hear this band play a concert. But he was wrong, because that first concert we had about 450 people perform. And before it was over, I had people coming up to me and say, well, you're going to do it again next year, aren't you? And so we were kind of hooked. I wanted to, the band liked the idea, and so the next year we moved it back into the Mills Hall. We sold it out. As a matter of fact, I got a warning from the fire marshal saying, you were over capacity, don't do that anymore. And so we decided to move it to the field house, which is where we were for several years before we got into the Kohl Center. So it was something that I had no idea it would grow to the way it did. I had no idea that it would grow eventually to be 3 nights and sell out 3 nights. But it was great. It was a great vehicle for the band to say, this is the end of our year, and we had a great time. I hope you did too.
You know, your entrances became legendary at those shows. Couple questions. Did you enjoy the flying, and were you ever scared?
Yes and no. The flying was one of the things I look for. A lot of people tried to say, well, Mike, you've done that before. You've done the flying before. Can you think of something new? Well, we had various ways of flying. We had various ways of doing it eventually, and my response is, no, it's too much fun. I don't want to quit the flying. That's fun. And for being frightened, no, I never really was. The stagehands and the people who were what they call the riggers were so good. They were so professional, and they tested over and over to make sure that it was safe. So I never had the least bit of
fire pole?
Well, the fire pole was different. There was only one time there was only one thing that I did that I would never have done again. I wouldn't do it again, and that was the incident where we had a fire pole rigged from the third balcony of the field house to the floor. Third balcony to the floor, straight down. And the idea was that I was to go grab onto the fire pole, slide down to the floor, and that was my entrance. They'd get the spotlight on me when I was at the top of the fire pole. I slide down, get off the fire pole, and I'm there. Well, the first thing we didn't think through is we didn't know how to rig it. So there could be no safety. There couldn't be any kind of a safety wire or anything, because you just had to get a hold of that fire pole and slide down. Nothing to save you. The other thing they forgot to tell me till about a day before we had to do the show was, Mike, because of the problem with where the pole would be located, we can't put it right next to the balcony. You're going to have to jump out and grab the fire pole. And dumb as I am, I did it. I didn't stop to think till later, when I started thinking all the things that could have gone wrong. That was pretty dumb. I did some other things that I would have done again that were probably very unsafe, but that was the one I wouldn't do again.
Another first came in the late 80s when the band played at Lambeau Field for the first time. And there was an interesting incident there with your favorite, the tuba players, right?
Yeah. And in 1989, the Wisconsin band played for the first time ever at Lambeau Field. Can you imagine that? First time ever. The Wisconsin band played in Lambeau Field. Now, you might ask why, and there were a lot of reasons. First of all, the Packers had their own band in those days, the Packer band, and they were doing a lot of the halftime entertainment. Second, Ray Dvorak didn't like the idea because he thought that that the band, if they did Lambeau, would be giving away something that he wanted them to have to come to see in Camp Randall. But I finally said yes, that we would do it, and the kids in the band were excited. I mean, it's the first time in Lambeau, and they were getting a big kick out of being there and the whole idea of it. And as a matter of fact, in those days, the band used to stay out in Lambeau for the entire game. So we were not just there for the show itself. Well, just before halftime, my tuba players came up and said, Mike, we want to do the tuba march. Is it okay? And I checked with the Packer people, and they said, sure, that sounds good. And you know the tuba march. It's a tradition that was around before I got here. Tuba players were doing that march around Camp Randall. They were doing that in the 1970 or 1935, I think is when it started doing it. But anyhow, they said do it, and so I told the band, and the tuba started out, and I remember they started out on the west side. They got about halfway down the west side of Lambeau Field, standing ovation. Standing ovation. And I knew they weren't that good. But they came around to the north end, and it looked like the wave. This is before the wave was around. People were standing up and cheering and hollering, and finally they made the turn at the north end, came back towards me, and I could see why. My tuba players had taken big pieces of white cardboard, cut out letters, stuck them to the bells of the tubas, so that as they marched by, they spelled out, "The Bears still suck." Well, in 1989, that was tough language. That was pretty harsh language. And I, of course, reminded the band, or the kids, the tuba players, that, you know, you have to remember you're not in Camp Randall. You be a little more genteel, be a little bit more understanding. Don't think about the audience. Show a little class on it. And sure enough, on Monday morning, I got a call from my dean. And he was very gracious about it, but he said the same thing. Remind the kids that they're representing the university, that they're not just going out there having fun, that they have to always represent the university. And he was very nice about it. But what really interested me and made her a friend of mine for life was that our chancellor at the time, Donna Shalala, was having a cocktail party. And this is a true story. Most of my stories are true. But Donna Shalala was our chancellor, and she was hosting a cocktail party at her home. And one gentleman got up and was very pretentious and saying, "Well, I enjoyed the band at the Packer game. I thought they did a nice job. The band looked very good." But he said, "But you know what those students did?" He said, "Those students spelled out, 'The Bears still suck.'" And Chancellor's reply, true story, "Well, they do, don't they?"
Around the time of that first Lambeau visit, Pat Richter arrives back in Madison as athletic director and hires Barry Alvarez, and within a few years, you have a dream realized, right? We go to the Rose Bowl for the first time in 30 years.
Yeah. Well, we were losing all those games, and in 1969. One incident happened that I recalled is the day we beat Iowa in 1969. After that long losing streak, there were students who were just overwhelmed by the fact that we'd finally won a game, and we were unbeaten in the Big Ten at that point. After the first game. And I'm not kidding. If you were there, you'll remember it happened. As we were leaving the stadium, the students were cheering, "Rose Bowl, Rose Bowl, Rose Bowl." And sure enough, 25 years later, we made it. But they got, in 1993, we did make it to the Rose Bowl, and it was one of the great moments. People always ask me, what was the greatest moment that you ever had with the Wisconsin band? That's easy. It was that Rose Bowl. Not to denigrate any of the other Rose Bowls, but it was so special. It was the whole state. If you were here and rooting for Wisconsin, you got involved with that Rose Bowl. It was just something you couldn't avoid. It was everywhere. And it wasn't just an event. It was a night after night after night after event so far as the band was concerned. We played at every venue you could think of in Southern California. And it was just a wonderful night. I do always like to tell this story. The night before the Rose Bowl, you get, as a band representative, you go to a meeting. You go to a meeting in a big ballroom, and they have representatives of all the groups there. And they tell you what to expect from the Rose Bowl parade, what to expect is going to happen, what you can and can't do. And one of the things they tell you is, now you're going to be marching. You're going to be marching for about 6 miles. Well, we were prepared for that. We knew that. He said, and you're going to be, it says, we want you to play for the whole time that you're marching. But he said, in the beginning of the parade, we want you to play continually. No breaks. We want you to play constantly because we don't know when the TV cameras are going to be on you. We want you to play for the whole time and just keep it going. And then there'll be a sign that says, cameras in. And when you see that sign, he said, from that point on, you can play whenever you want. And then he looked at me, and he said, Wisconsin, what I'd suggest you do is play whenever you see some patches of your fans along the parade route. We played on Wisconsin 137 times that day.
Mike, at some point during that week, you shared the phrase with the band, Moments of Happiness.
Yeah, the book title came from something that I experienced. It happened that first Rose Bowl. It was the night before the Rose Bowl, and one of the things I wanted the kids in the band to know, and I explained it to them, this may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it's a lifetime people who have been a part of the band or fans of the band would give anything to be able to do. This is a great moment. Don't take it for granted. Don't take the chance, don't take the opportunity to be in the Rose Bowl for granted and think, well, it'll happen again. To me, it happened another 5 times. But I wanted them to understand that they were going to experience something they might never get to experience again. And I said, remember this moment of happiness, and that's exactly the phrase that I use, that you're going to experience. Put it in your mind, put it in your heart, so that whenever anything happens that isn't maybe as much fun or as happy or as enjoyable, remember those moments of happiness and call on them to make you feel better about whatever's going on at the time. It became something that I used from that point on, in 1993, 94, from that point on, it was a part of my pregame talk to the freshmen as they were getting ready to do their first band experience. And I said, it's not going to be all great here in the Wisconsin band. There are going to be days that you're going to hate me. And there's going to be days that you don't like what we're doing. But I said, remember, there are going to be moments of happiness. I can promise you moments of happiness that will be unlike anything that you had experienced before. And it became such a byword in my mind and such a phrase that I'd used all the time that for me it was the natural title of the book. Doug might tell you the publisher didn't think so.
Oh, Mike, usually in these instances, the publishers win. Mike fought City Hall, and the title, I think, has been, everybody likes it. So, you know, on that halftime show was a rock and roll show at the Rose, that first Rose Bowl.
Right.
But you ended it with My Way, which was interesting.
What's a rock and roll tune?
Well, it's Elvis used to sing.
Well, that's the reason I used it. Is I wanted to do something that it was a rock and roll show. We did Little Richard. We did Chuck Berry. I think we did James Brown. It was all rock and roll tunes. And I needed an ending. I think a halftime show should always have an ending. It should build up to an important climactic point. And I looked at all the rock and roll tunes, and none of what I would call rock and roll tunes fit. But Elvis had a big hit record on My Way, and he played it, or he sang it at a lot of his concerts. So I thought, well, that works. If Elvis can do it, I can do it. I even got suits like his. But I used it, and I thought it worked because it was in the context of most of those rock and roll artists had passed their prime, and certainly I think at that point Elvis had passed away. So I felt like it was a good tribute, and so that became that first show that I did. And you start me thinking about it, Doug. I
thought maybe subtly there was something there. You know, a Wisconsin band, beloved, national reputation, but there were some folks that, you know, looked askance at the fifth quarter and stuff, and so I thought maybe, you know, we did it our way. We, you know, did it my way.
You think I might have been thinking that? I'm going to do it my way?
Just a thought.
Well, Doug is right. I think that we had received some criticism, more from other bands who didn't understand and what we were trying to do. They felt that we were degrading what they were trying to do, that we were making fun of them. And that wasn't what, you all know that's not what the fifth quarter was about. It was about having fun. Fifth quarter was about, we've done our work for the week, we've done our work for the show, now let's let off some steam. And so I let the band do things that other bands thought were maybe not appropriate. My Way said, and I would be amiss if I didn't say, it wasn't just my way, although you get some arguments, it was our way. All of you who would object to that can see me later. But that's the way I wanted it to come across, that this is the Wisconsin band way. And I wanted that to maybe be impressed in their minds.
You know, speaking of halftime shows needing an ending, you know, or something, an exclamation point. There was one in the late 80s that you decided there should be a circus-themed show at Camp Randall. Can you remember that one?
You had to bring it up. Yeah, well, these were during some of the dark times in Wisconsin. We were going through a period of time. There was one season where we won one game, and the athletic department called me in and said, Mike, have you got any ideas to help build up interest in the game, get people to come to the games? We need to have more fans come through the stands. And I had been planning for a while to do something with a circus theme. I thought that works for Wisconsin. You got the Circus World Museum close by. There's that relationship. Everybody likes the circus. Nobody doesn't dislike the act. I said, let's put on a circus show, and we'll not just make it a show at halftime, but we'll try to get the whole crowd included. So I did a lot of things. I called the Zork clown people. I knew they had a group of clowns. I said, can you come and be a part of our show? And they said, without hesitation, yes. I called some people who I knew were acrobats and gymnasts. I said, can you come and put on a gymnastics show on the field as part of the halftime circus show? And they said, sure. We had simulations. I had people with long poles like tightrope walkers walking the 50-yard line or the 40-yard line, trying to give you that simulation. We tried to get everything we could. I got the calliope, the calliope. It's not a calliope, it's a calliope. But I got them to bring the calliope down from Baraboo and play it in the end zone. And you could hear the calliope, and the nice thing about it, you could hear some of the other music that was playing too. Some of you got that. But so we had that going in the end zone, and I had the band itself, the Wisconsin band, play a circus, say all circus music. It was the theme of the show. And then I got to thinking, you know, you can't have a circus show without real animals. You got to have a real animal. What do you think of when you think of circus? An elephant. You think of an elephant. So I called Circus World again. And they said, no problem. They said, we have an elephant named Molly. Molly is one of those elephants that they give rides to when they were doing that at Circus World. Said, we'll let her come to Madison. We'll bring her to Madison. All you got to do is pay the cost of transporting her. We'll let you have an elephant. Well, I got to thinking that it's not good enough just to have an elephant there. I got to ride the elephant. I got to ride the elephant into Camp Randall. And so we developed a plan. And the way the show ran, I would do the conducting from the halftime show, for the halftime show. Then at a point in the halftime show, I ran right up into the ramp where Molly was stationed. I ran up in the ramp, and I got on top of Molly's back, and we started down the ramp. Soon as I became visible, and Molly became visible, because the crowd hadn't seen her at that point, as soon as she became visible, there was a huge roar. Because, I mean, who expected to see a live elephant in Camp Randall? We got down to the 40-yard line. Everything went exactly as I'd planned. We got to the 50-yard line, and I got off the elephant, slid off the elephant, and there was another tremendous crowd reaction. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I knew this would go over, but I didn't think it'd go over that big. And then I understood what the reaction was about. Molly had done on the 50-yard line what a lot of animals do when they get excited. And it was there for everyone to see. And smell. So I finished at varsity and went off the stage, and sure enough, they had scoop shovels come out. And notice I used the plural there, scoop shovels, to get the best green. But there was still the odor. So they had to bring out fire hoses. They brought a fire hose diagonally across the field from the northeast corner down to the 50-yard line, where they squirted the field so it would be clean. And finally, after all that time, the game officials decided it was fit for the team to start. Well, the upshot of it was Wisconsin got a 5-yard penalty for delay of game.
true.
I always thought it should have been 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct.
Go ahead.
What were you going to say about the news?
No.
One of Doug's colleagues in the newspaper business, wasn't Doug, had a headline that I thought went a little bit too far. The headline stated, and this was in the State Journal, the Wisconsin team wasn't the only thing that smelled up Camp Randall.
Yeah, they did. So the first time I think that anyone broached the idea of you retiring was that first Rose Bowl, correct? January of '94.
Yeah, it was. After I had done the Rose Bowl in '94, I'd been there 25 years. And I actually had people say, well, 25 years, are you thinking about retiring? And I didn't know that was a suggestion or a request. But it actually happened. I had a large number of people say, well, are you going to quit doing it? And I had a lot of people come up to me and say, well, what are you going to do next now that you've done everything that you ever wanted to do? But the reality was that I hadn't done everything I wanted to do. I wanted to keep doing the things that were pleasurable, and so it was kind of a moot question. I never really did anything about it except just kept on working.
2019 is 50 years, so that kind of played into, your decision to finally step aside.
Yeah. The 50-year thing was kind of after a while. I hadn't thought about it, but when it started getting closer, it's like, well, that's a great landmark time to stop. And frankly, I also started to understand that I wanted to end before people told me I should end. And that may have happened and I didn't know about it, but nonetheless, I felt like when I retired, I wanted to say to myself, if nothing else, that I still could keep doing it for a while. And honestly, I was able to say that whether anybody else believed it or not. I believed it, and I thought I could do this several more years, but it was a good benchmark.
You've been busy since. People may know, some may not, with a podcast and one-man show here at the Playhouse that you did.
Yeah, I've done a lot of things since. I did a one-man show. I did it here a few weeks ago on this stage. I did a one-man show. I did one a few months earlier than that, where I told some of the same stories that I'm telling you. I told some stories that I didn't tell you and probably won't. But I had a small jazz ensemble, which was terrific. And the best part of it was I sang. And I don't know about other people, but it gave me a lot of pleasure to do that. And then I do a podcast that's still on regularly. You can hear. I've got about a dozen of them, and I've got another 2 or 3 in the can ready to go, which is fun to do. Basically, if you ever taught my class, or you ever attended my class in popular music in the United States, all I did was make tapes of what I do in the class, but without the visual things that I could do. So that became something I was involved. I do a lot of guest conducting. I'm involved with a group called COPA, which is involved with community organizations from the performing arts, which try to get more and more involvement with people in communities who have groups that want to be able to perform but don't necessarily have a venue where they can do it. People can't afford this venue. This is expensive to come here, but if you've got a smaller venue or something that is designed for that sort of thing, I think there's a real need for that. So I've been involved with that. I can't think of anything else right offhand.
You know, there's a line near the end of our book where Mike quotes Carl Wallenda, the high wire artist. And Wallenda said, "To be on the wire is life, the rest is waiting." And when I think about my friend, I think to put on a show is life. I hope you'll join me in encouraging Mike to keep putting on shows.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we'd like to open it up for some questions from you folks. If you have them, we've got a couple people with microphones, I think.
So, moments of happiness. You talked about the first Rose Bowl, but you didn't talk about the first bowl game we went to in 1981. And for a lot of us, there were some significant moments of happiness for 18-year-olds that had never been out of state before. Can you talk about the Garden State Bowl?
Yeah, Wisconsin went to the first bowl game they ever did in 1981, Garden State Bowl in East Rutherford, New Jersey. We were excited about doing it. First place, the band got to fly. It was a very quick trip because we didn't have a lot of time to do. I mean, it was during the school year, as I recall. But it was so exciting because we had finally made it. And I remember a couple of things that stood out. We were playing Tennessee. We're playing Tennessee, and we had a rehearsal the morning before the game. And it was probably 34 degrees, something like that. And there's snow on the ground, all over the ground. And the Tennessee band came out, and they had parkas, earmuffs, long coats, and they did their rehearsal, and then we came out. The kids were in gym shorts, no long pants, and when their band looked at our band, I knew right away we had them. The other bowl game I would make reference to is the next year we played in Shreveport, Louisiana. Coach Barry Alvarez used to say, "There's no such thing as a bad bowl." He had never been in Shreveport, Louisiana. But the interesting thing was, it was the first bowl game Wisconsin ever won, 1982, and it was mud. I mean, we marched all day. Every practice, every performance was in mud, and it was one of the worst shapes I've ever seen the uniforms in. But it was just. But we were ecstatic because we'd won that ball game. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting to me, and Doug pointed it out in his book, it was the first game that ESPN ever broadcast. Yeah. Was that Wisconsin game on the what's the name of the bowl again? I forgot.
Independence Bowl?
What?
Independence Bowl.
Independence Bowl, yeah. I remembered Shreveport, but
The Inconvenience Bowl.
Yeah, but even that has memories of happiness because we won the ball game, and the trip home was terrific. I mean, the kids were excited, and we forgot that it had rained, and we were soaked and cold.
The band's motto has always been "Eat a Rock." Where did that come from, and why Eat a Rock?
Eat a Rock is the result of another one of my great pep talks. It happened the night before a game. I honestly don't remember what game it was, but I know it was in the 70s. I was giving a pep talk, and I've always stressed physicality. I've always stressed I wanted the band to be as physical as they could possibly be. And I would say here very modestly, I always felt that there was no more physical band in the country than what the Wisconsin band got to be. I was very proud of the fact that we were as physical as any band could be. But I stressed that continually. And the night before this game, I said, I don't want you to be any namby-pambies out there. I want you to be tough. I want you to march every step just as hard as you can. I want you to dig in on every turn. I said, I want you to go out there and I want you to march so hard. I want you to be hard enough you could chew nails. No, you gotta eat a rock. And it hadn't been out of my mouth more than a couple seconds till the band started chanting, eat a rock, eat a rock, eat a rock. And I knew I had him because that became a motto that I use up to this day. I still use it to indicate when things aren't going as well as you want them to, or you're not working as hard as you should, remember to eat a rock, because that will sort of give you an impetus to do what has to be done. We put it on horn cases, we put it on bumper stickers, and as Doug knows, could tell you, we have I put it there myself. As the band goes down the runway, the ramp that takes you onto the field, right above that doorway as the band is going down, I put a sign there many, many years ago, a red sign that says, eat a rock. It's the last thing the band is supposed to see before they go on the field and remember what they're supposed to be doing on the field at Camp Randall. Oh.
I would just say to you that for the women who are too old to have been able to march, that the band is wonderful, and we think you are more physically functional than any one of the athletic teams.
I'm a little annoyed that you put that last sentence. I thought you were going to end with, you are more, what would you say, more physically? Why did you have to put out, what, you're more physically functional? Why didn't you just stop right there and say, than any other athletic team? Why did you put that part on? No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Say, Mike, would you talk about the first time you took us back to your home state for a football game?
Were you there?
Oh, yeah. All three of us were.
Oh, yeah, they would have been. My first game, the first time I got enabled the band to go out of town to march at an out-of-town football game was in Indiana in 1970. And I was excited because it was my chance to go back to Indiana. Butler's 35 miles away from IU, and I had done some graduate work at IU, so this was a big deal for me. And I made I made a lot of mistakes about it. There's another one I made. The night before the game, I decided we should stay in a hotel in Bloomington, in Indianapolis. Short trip down to IU the next day. Well, it was our first trip out of town ever with the band, and I'm just trying to think of how to say this nicely. There were a lot of people who were used to some of the old ways with the band, and They had a good time. I'll just put it that way. The party light was on. And the next day we went to rehearsal, and it was ugly. And I remember very, very distinctly, about 25, 30 minutes into the rehearsal, I walked away and said, that's enough. I can't take what I'm seeing. You guys are running into each other. You don't know how to do the step. I said, I'm out of here. And I walked away and sort of left the band in a state of shock, I think. I don't know what happened in the next couple hours, but somehow along the line, some of the people who were to become leaders in the band began to demonstrate their leadership. And they said, this isn't right. And they worked in my favor of saying, we can't go out on the field anywhere and do the kind of show that our rehearsal showed. The next day we did a terrific show. I got it on film. It was a great show. And I think that was a turning point with the band, that they understood again, like the Louis Armstrong, that you always have to perform. You always have to raise yourself up to a level that you may not think you can do. You have to sometimes be more than you think you can do. And that was I think anybody who was in the band, the guys I see on the front row now who shook their head yes and say, oh yeah, they remembered because of what it was like before and what it was like after. And they're partly responsible for any success we had later with the band, because they demonstrated what it takes. Thanks.
Speaking about filming the shows, can you tell us a little bit about the dummy list?
Oh. Sure. I filmed every show, or we filmed. They hadn't done that in Wisconsin for a long time. It was kind of intermittent. But I finally got somebody who would say they would film every halftime show. And when I looked at it, I just didn't want to show it back. I would watch the film maybe a dozen times, running it forwards, running it backwards, running it forward, trying to find every mistake I could find in a halftime show. I wanted to find everything that I could find, whether it be turning wrong, or whether it be marching on the wrong foot, or not coming to attention when you're supposed to. I tried to find her, and I made a list of it. And I published the list. I published a list on the next rehearsal, Tuesday, and everybody could see their name. And the band started calling it the dummy list, because you didn't want to be on the dummy list. For a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, it's a matter of pride. You don't want to see your name on a list where you made a mistake. The second was, we instituted a policy where if you're on the dummy list, it costs you $1. I said, we're going to take $1 and you're going to put it in the party fund. We had great parties. but that became something that nobody wanted to be on the dummy list. And I would hear people in the next rehearsal say, well, so-and-so was on the dummy list. Or I heard people say, well, I should have been on the dummy list, but Mike didn't see it. The dummy list also led to another Wisconsin tradition, a thing called the Strebe Award. The Strebe Award, and I'm anticipating questions here, but the Strebe Award is an award that the band still gives to a person who during the course of the season makes a mistake with the greatest amount of class. Excellence in error, we call it. If you're going to make a mistake, my philosophy is make it good. If you're going to make a mistake, go at it full blown and don't worry about the consequences. Give everything you have to that performance. Disregard any mistakes. The award was named after a man named Carl Strebe, who was a terrific guy in the band. He was the kind of guy, he's one of those 100%ers you always talk about. And Carl worked very hard in the band. And I'll tell you the story of how the award came to be and was named for Carl Strebe. We were making a picture of a trombone. Now, you're going to have to picture this in your mind. The trombone starts here, it's a curve with a slide around there. You got that pictured in your mind? Here's the mouthpiece, goes around to the slide, like so. That's the trombone. That was a picture that we were putting on the field. And it was a simple routine. The guys in the slide were supposed to march out 16 steps, then come back 16 steps. March out 16 steps, come back 16 steps. Turn, face the audience, end of routine. I'm not expecting great applause. I'm expecting a polite, oh, that was nice. That's about all I want. It came the day of the game. Carl Strebe is the end guy on the trombone slide, right here. We get to that spot. Carl Strebe goes out 16 steps with the trombone, does a terrific turn. I mean, you can't do it better than Carl did it. He put his whole heart and soul, body into it. Came back 16 steps, did another marvelous turn. I can't teach it better than he does it. Then Carl goes out 8 steps. Makes another marvelous turn. Comes back 8 steps, turns, faces the audience, marks time 8 steps till the rest of the slide joins him. I can never forget what I said as I was watching that happen. I said, oh my goodness, look what Carl did. It was something like that. But that's not the end of the story. That's not what gave me the idea for the award. And this is true. A band director, right after the game, stopped me, and it was very complimentary. He said, oh, the band looked good, and so forth. And I said, thanks a lot. And he said, and this is true, he said, but Mike, he said, that thing with the trombone, he said, I didn't get it. He couldn't believe that a kid would make an error in front of 50,000 people and not just go all to pieces, not just blow up in there. So I told him it was a new kind of a spit valve.
Time for one more question.
Hi, Mike. So I have a million questions for you, but the one I'm deciding to choose for tonight is, for those who don't know, Mike made the effort after every halftime show to either give a pat on the back, grab your wrist, do some sort of acknowledgement after the game. And it usually happened 1 to 3 times throughout the entire march back to Humanities. And Mike, I want you to know how special that made me feel out of a group of 300 people. You know, sometimes I felt like I just was a part of a group and I wasn't seen, but every single game, that was special for me. So I just want to know kind of where the tradition started for that and why.
You ask a hard question. It started my first year. In my first year with the band, those of you who are in the band remember one of the great traditions that we had that we lost for no reason other than it was just circumstances. The band would finish at Camp Randall, would march back to the Humanities Building where we dismissed. On the way back to the Humanities Building, we stopped at the Children's Hospital. And I see guys, I see guys nodding their head. It was such a great experience. Some of these kids knew their time was limited. It was a very touching moment. And as we started back, it was at that point I started congratulating the kids for taking the time, because it added another 20 minutes to our day. And I think it meant a lot to the kids, and I wanted them to know that it was seen and appreciated. That's how it started. Once you start something, it's very hard because it became something that, and you don't know how much it pleases me to hear you say something like that. It's because of the fact that people did feel good about it that I decided it was something I wanted to keep doing. And I'll tell you very honestly, it meant as much to me as it meant to you. So.
What a wonderful place to end. Thank you, Doug and Mike. Thanks all of you for coming. Go get your book signed. Happy holidays, and on Wisconsin.